produces live music events for the community and also education events for the community. We have one annual ticketed event that supports our revenue, and then we have a nonprofit element where we produce the Moab Free Concert Series, as you probably know, and a kind of growing roster of school programming. Maybe you've heard, I know I've emailed a few of you and talked with you about the need for a stage venue in our community. And so our organization partnered with some others in the community, are spearheading a push to get a mobile performance stage for the Moab area. Is this one? So I'll just dive right into it. We have 0 mobile stages in the community of Moab, Utah, because of COVID and because of the events that we like to produce in this town. Outdoor venue is kind of a no-brainer right now. For example, for our Moab Folk Festival, which brings about 1,500 folks to town every year, we are only doing our outdoor venues. And
there's lots of organizations in Moab that have used in the past the Folk Festival stage too. They've been the largest contributor to a stage when there was a much more cumbersome and unstable. Like the Mark used it all the time for the Red Rocks Arts Festival, and a lot of other organizations in town have used it as well for public events.
Right, and so it's the benefits to bringing a mobile stage to Moab. It's less expensive for local events because right now we have to run from outside of town. For instance, this year, for the Free Concert Series and for the Moab Folk Festival, we are spending over $10,000 in rental fees to bring something down from Salt Lake City. And I know that the city has also spent their hard-earned money renting stages for the 4th of July Festival and for the Red Rock Arts Festival to the tune of probably more like $5,000.
Cassie, will you pull your mic just closer
Yes.
to you?
Oh, absolutely. Sorry.
No
And
worries. Actually, if you pull it a little bit more.
okay.
Perfect. Thanks.
Hello. So yes, it helps increase safety. The previous stage that we used was a little. It was not.
It was bouncy.
Say it again.
It was bouncy.
It was bouncy, and it was also a homemade stage. It was like crafted for our organization, and while it worked for a while, it maybe had some more risky aspects. So it promotes outdoor entertainment. It makes outdoor entertainment easier. It helps promote Moab as an arts destination, and one thing I think is really important, contributes to us as an arts destination and economic diversification. So that's something we're all talking about and looking at, and I think it makes Moab more attractive to people who want to come here and do things that are maybe less noisy, and for event producers that want to come here and produce their events. Other communities own stages such as that we're proposing here, including Durango, Colorado, the city of St. George, and Ogden, Utah, and the counties own them and manage them and rent them to support them. So here's a little slide about demonstrated need. These are the number of people that attend the events that we are proposing would use this. As the previous manager of a portable stage in Moab, the Friends of the Moab Folk Festival had our homemade stage, and these were the events that we rented our stage to. And so you can see that it's already, if we don't even grow this, audience, it's 12,000 people, and that includes many Moabites and many visitors to the community, so it's like a diverse group that we are supporting. And keep trying to push that button, it's so fun.
Don't touch the dongle.
Exactly. So I've been doing my homework. I had some time last year to poke around, and look at what was available in terms of outdoor stages, portable stages, and this particular model keeps coming up not only with the company, obviously, who's sold it to me fully, but with other event producers, sound crews, other people in the industry. I keep coming back to this as sort of like the industry standard. It's fully hydraulic. It is safe in every way. This company has 30 years of experience in producing these stages. This slide really is just to demonstrate that there are ways that the events can not only advertise themselves, but the sponsors, including the city of Moab, if they were to join forces with us, to acknowledge themselves. So it's got plenty of space for marketing and also plenty of space for performances. So here's some the previous stage also took a long time to set up and required 6 or more people. So it was pretty cumbersome. This one can be set up in about an hour. Now that we've rented it, I mean, maybe round up from that 30 minutes. And it requires about 2 people. It's got really high wind resistance. It's stored as a self-contained weatherproof trailer, so it can be stored outside. It doesn't need like an under roof storage. It just looks like a travel trailer, and it's built to last. So there's a little video on how it works, and I can forward you guys the video because it's really pretty nifty, but that's not going to work right now. And, why is it not going? Oops, sorry. So the cost of the stage, from the latest estimate I've gotten from the stage line SL100. Did we skip a slide? No, okay. The stage line SL100 costs about $160,000, and that would include ramps, stairs, things for banners, things for the stage system. And they provided us with this handy kind of return on investment document, which basically allows us to estimate the annual income from renting this stage. And while it certainly is not going to pay for itself in a year or anything like that, I think it could pay for the management of the stage, the labor and upkeep, taxes, that kind of thing. And again, we estimated the spending for our organization alone on stage rentals to be $8,580, and the mark about $6,000. So the management proposal is something that we're hoping to build a multi-agency partnership with the city, the county, and our nonprofit organization. We would help facilitate the purchase. We have actually pitched this to the Travel Council. And it is under consideration, probably going to be recommended for funding. And I've spoken to the county, and what they would like to see is some sort of vote of support, financial and otherwise, from the city as part of the proposal. Our organization has written some funding into our Shuttered Venues Operator Grant. We got some CARES funding. And while we made no money last year, we're still willing to pitch in what we can towards this. We also have secured some private funding. I know the MARC has written a grant to contribute, and it would be great if the city could find some source, perhaps from the RAP tax, or, Mika and I are both really pretty close to that tax, and I know that funding probably isn't coming anytime soon, but it would be great if the city could, support us financially. And we also are hoping that the city could help us in terms of management, where perhaps like one city employee could be trained in setting it up. Maybe one county employee could be trained in setting it up. Somebody in our organization could be trained in setting it up. And then those people who are trained could lead their particular crews, especially if the city is using it for their events. We would like them to be able to participate. The city maybe could provide storage space for the trailer, things like that, that maybe aren't as financial oriented.
Are you thinking that if the city were a financial contributor, that we would not rent it? We would not be charged a rental fee?
We haven't worked that out yet. I mean, obviously, that would be the hope, that it would be very, and if there was a fee, it would be very much more affordable than something like when I have to pay $4,000 per rental. My goal would be that it would be much less, but yes, of course.
And then would it be owned by the folk festival, the Friends of the Folk Festival?
I think that's to be determined, depending on who actually pays for it. If the county is willing to fund it with support from other entities, then maybe it would be the county that would be owning it. I think that's a little bit remains to be seen because the funding is right now theoretical.
Kind of like Star Hall, where the county owns it. People have contributed to it. A number of people know how to run the soundboard.
Right.
But we all kind of still pay into it.
Right. Well, and Star Hall costs $300 to rent, so it's extremely affordable for anybody to use that facility. And that's the way I'd like to see this, pan out, to where it is an affordable resource for folks that are wanting to have events that you need a stage. So I don't know if I could, yes, that's what I'd like to say. Sure, you can have it for free, but right now it's not mine to say that for, but to say that about. But
I just didn't know how deep you got into the management proposal of ownership and rental and agreements.
We have proposed a rental amount, but what hasn't been determined is, like, for instance, if I spearhead this whole project and contribute our grant money and everything like that. I mean, I'd almost actually rather support the cheaper rental of the stage and perpetuate it than to expect too much back from it, because then, it does need to have something coming in. So I don't know. That's a good question.
It's really going to matter on who are the primary contributors to buying it, right? Because if you pay a majority fund to it, then obviously you have a right to using it and helping decide how it's managed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Is there financing for this, or is it you have to buy it outright?
Well, there's certainly financing for it. What I'd like to think is that we can buy it outright with funding. That is an option. It kind of remains to be seen. They do have programs for financing.
So the $7,500 that we received for the ECHOS grant fund, is that correct? The Mark did.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough buy-in for the county, or they're looking for more than that?
I imagine with the $150,000 purchase that, maybe something more significant, like maybe if the city could, at the minimum, match that $7,500. And I know Liz has applied for a few other grants for this. I think any kind of show of support, because this would be a community resource. And as you know, the lines between city and county and events world they're a little blurred. And most of the events happen in the city limits.
Well, I think the hope too is, since the city is the one collecting the RAP tax that was proposed to have, 300,000 plus income per year, that would be, we could get a reasonable amount of money, put it towards something like this that would benefit the community so largely. So that's another, I think, option that we were talking about as potentials, especially since, Folk Festival and Arts Council and everybody was really active in getting that passed. So it would be something to consider potentially.
So question for you, if I may. So if the city, just suppose the city were to buy it outright, whatever, I'm not, any idea how long it would take for a payback? In other words, if then you rent it out to any interested party who you were comfortable with taking care of it, for example, for all these activities, plus many more, presumably, that will be generated when the availability of this guy comes in. So how long of a payback period are we talking about? Like 100 years or 2
Oh.
years or what?
That's a good question. I would guess, I mean, in our return on investment document, we estimated in the first year it would really only bring in about $2,500. And year 5, we're estimating that would bring in about $7,500. I think it would be more like a 20-year plan. And because these things have such long runs, it would be great. I also think that this needs to be looked at as not just as a money generator, but as a community builder and as a really important piece of our maybe economic future for arts events and for community building in general, for bringing people together. If any of you have been to our free concert series, you know that it is a free event. And like the 4th of July is a free event, so we're not asking for money back for these things that we're giving to our community who are very much contributing to everything that happens here. So I think we need to think about it not only as a financial investment, but as a, kind of like
Yeah, I understand. Well, it would be cool if you did something like they do in Star Hall where, because my wife and I, for example, donated some money towards, and we got a little name, and we always, every time we go in there, where's our seat? Where's our seat?
Sure.
And something, and if you give $1,000, you get a bigger plaque, and if you give 100,000, you get an even bigger plaque. I mean, you get the-
Yeah, I think if the city were able to come up with, $15,000 or $20,000, they would get their return on investment, a little sooner than if they were forking out $150,000. So anyway, I mean, we can talk about all that stuff. I know you're very busy tonight. What I just wanted to do is let you know what we were thinking, let you know what has been done. I presented to the Travel Council, to you, and to the County Commission in hopes to build some sort of like a multi-agency support for this. And then when it does come into our community, I think we will all benefit because events are something that, bring us together. So.
Well, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for
Sure.
presenting and thanks for all your work and trying to figure out this community stage that's easy because nobody wants to volunteer to set up that old stage anymore.
Agreed. Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Marshall especially.
I know, yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't bring him with you tonight.
No.
But he's probably sleeping.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you
Well,
so
thank
much.
you so much.
And we'll kind of let that marinate between the grant that was written by Mark's staff, and we did receive the $7,500 that could be allocated for that, and the suggestion by both of you of using the wrap tax, which would be determined by the committee that we'll be forming once we have a piggy bank to decide what to do with. Okay, we're going to move on in our agenda to 5.2, presentation by Moab Mosquito Abatement District, Michelle Raven.
We are having technical difficulties.
Okay. I want to go there. Where's there?
It's in Oregon, I do believe.
It's Oregon?
I think so.
I don't want to go there anymore. I was thinking maybe it was Southern Pacific. If it's Northern, I'm not interested. Thank you both for coming tonight.
You don't know, it can be anywhere you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's a film set at Ken's Lake.
What?
Film set at Ken's Lake.
Oh, my gosh. Oh. I had a little bit of ice on my windshield today. Like ice snow or something. It was bizarre. It wouldn't have been the film set for today. So do we have her on the,
It is not working. I can get it here, but I cannot get it there. So I'm struggling remoting in the computer.
okay.
So I can see her. She can't see or hear us. I don't know if this will work or not.
We can always keep going
We might have to keep going.
and just plug her in when you're able to, because we could get through our reporting. Okay, which might be pretty quick. So why don't we do that? Let's go to agenda item 6, administrative reports. Carly?
Hi, good evening. Just a couple of items, again, written out and available to the public too, if anyone wants to follow along. A couple updates I want everyone to know about. We are embarking on revising, updating, completing the Sustainability Action Plan, which has been on the agenda for several years now. The city's new sustainability director is engaging with local area experts and getting feedback on what that plan should be looking like, kind of focus groups, before we formalize that process to do some groundwork. Also, we are hiring an AmeriCorps position for sustainability. So we've have the information about that posted on the city website, sustainability website. If you know anybody who'd be interested in it, please let us know, direct them to Mila. An update from last council meeting, our well 12 construction is still going well. We're doing the downhole geophysical testing next week. I thought that Councilmember Duncan might be excited about that. And I have better numbers too about what we expect to get produced from the well, which is about 600 gallons per minute. Originally, we thought about 400, but it's looking more promising. Along the lines of construction, the Mill Creek water line, you folks might notice some blue pipes being staged at Power Dam. Those are for the Mill Creek water line. Just say hello to your new water line. They'll be going in, and that construction will last approximately 6 months. Some really exciting news on the grant funding front. We have preliminary approval for grant funding to get some pickleball courts installed here in the community. We still have more approvals to do, and there's a lot of administrative legwork that we have to sort of jump through and work. But we're working hard to see if we can get this funding. It's going to require a 50% match. And of course, we'll have to do a site selection process that has a public process component to it. So I think at the next meeting, oh, Annie's not here, we plan to bring that to you to discuss further, but very exciting.
That is going to be a public hearing.
I know.
Because people have a lot of feelings about where that
About
pickleball
where that's
court
going to
should
go.
go.
There are strong opinions in the community, but we'll try to hash through it.
Carly, who's that grant funding through?
I believe it's from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It's a federal grant, is my understanding.
So isn't there a lot of stipulations to it, like you have to
They're
have a-
like environmental
year-round,
reviews,
yeah.
archaeological reviews that we have to do.
Okay.
Yeah. And I believe it is LWCF. That was the last I heard. Additional federal funding that we're pursuing, just regarding the Pack Creek fire and the subsequent flooding that we experienced and the damage to our infrastructure that resulted in that flooding. So we're applying for grants through the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, and this will help us repair the approaches to some of the city bridges along Pack Creek, which will be really great. But it will require a 25% match, and we're looking for that funding. I think Ben has been helping Chuck do that.
And would that be the Pack Creek Bridge that Mike's been talking about, that Chuck's been talking
Like
about?
along the 400 East widening, I think it dovetails with that project too. That is Pack Creek, yeah. I think there are 4 bridges that cross Pack Creek, and then one where it converges into Mill Creek at 5th West, and it would include that one too. And then finally, just an update, I've got a lot of questions from council members and community members too. So I don't mean to put her on the spot, but we know that Nora is planning to retire, and we're very sad to see her go. But we are going to be posting her position imminently in order to start that recruitment process. She will be part of the recruitment process if we get good candidates. And we also will be reposting the still unfilled assistant planner position that was budgeted, I believe, last year, and we have not been able to fill. So those two, again, if you hear about anyone in your circles who might be interested, please direct them to our HR site. And those are all my updates.
Thank you so much, Carly. Summer, are we not? Okay. We'll move on to 7, mayor and council reports. Carly, thank you again. Thanks for the reporting and thanks for all the work that you're doing. I attended the League of Cities and Towns annual conference and attended the board meeting there, bittersweet, as that will be my last conference with them. But exciting to know that Logan Monson, who is running for mayor unopposed in Blanding, will be taking my seat at the end of this year. So we will continue to have representation in our region, and Logan and I have been working well together. He's awesome, and I actually hope to bring him up. Maybe he'll come to the December meeting so I can introduce him to all of you, as he would be your representative for that board. And then I also was happy to sit on a panel talking about rural resources and a panel talking about the collaborative networking. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to report to all of you that we're doing weekly leadership meetings at City Hall with Carly and Ben and Chief and Public Works Director and myself, so that we can do a better job of cross-collaboration and communication on all things. So I just wanted to report that that's been happening. And I am hopeful that the next mayor will continue that effort. Thank you all for attending the PD Appreciation Barbecue. That was super fun, and I think a much-needed event. There was a Utah Alliance meeting of executive directors. What is it? Oh no. What is Elaine's position in Now August? Economic Development Director. I was like, not executive, the other one. So we had all the economic development directors from across the state come to Moab for an event. It was super cool. And there was a group of us that sat on a panel and talked about housing. Jason Taylor was there. It was a great event, I think. We did a pretty good job talking about the resources we have in Moab for housing. And it was really nice to see that we have done a lot, that sometimes it feels like we're not doing enough because we're in a housing crisis, but we are well ahead of the rest of the cities and towns in our state in the efforts to try to poke at this affordable housing beast. And I just, I'm really proud of our efforts. It doesn't mean we need to stop, for sure, but it was nice to see all of our efforts highlighted at that event. And yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day. We had a celebration on the front lawn of City Hall, and I just wanted to read my proclamation, although it wasn't agendaed for the proclamation. I did want to read it this evening, and then I'll be done. So this was for yesterday, Monday, October 11, 2021. Whereas the second Monday in October is an opportunity for us in Moab to celebrate and recognize the diversity of our community, especially the contributions and the enduring culture and traditions of all Native American Indigenous peoples. And whereas the city of Moab acknowledges the land we currently identify as the Moab Valley to be the traditional and ancestral lands of the Ute and ancestral Pueblo people. And whereas celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day is a means to more accurately label and reclaim the historical events surrounding the colonization of the Americas and the subsequent 500 years of Indigenous resilience and resistance. And whereas we have a responsibility to recognize and remember that federal, state, and local policies have historically sought to assimilate and displace Native people and eradicate Native cultures. And whereas the city of Moab has a responsibility to oppose this systemic racism toward Native members of our community and dig deeper to identify and work to eradicate the implicit bias that is found in our city. And whereas the city of Moab stands yesterday, as a community full of love, respect, and gratitude for one another, for the land we are called to protect, and for our future generations, that they may stand where we stand today with clean air and water and a community united. That's it for me. Ronnie?
Okay, I don't have a lot. Those of us who are on the group working to interview visioning consultants for community vision and associated strategic planning held 4 interviews, so that's all interesting. That's moving along. Attended a webinar on climate with Representative John Curtis, or featuring him, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the mayor for all her work to not only acknowledge but organize these Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations, and I'm hoping whoever's coming on next will work with council to continue that and continue to build our relationships with that part of our community. Let's see, because I was running to help set up for that, I only caught part of the candidate forum that was going on for council and mayor candidates, but I wanted to thank League of Women Voters and KZMU and the Times Independent for putting that on yesterday. And if people didn't hear it, it's available after the fact. You can go to the KZMU site, and I also wanted to thank the city for its organizing of the Red Rock Art Street Festival, which I know a lot of people enjoyed. I did notice we got some questions about it after the fact, and I know recently some residents have been asking about events we've had, and there's been some confusion about who they should go to with that correspondence. So my understanding is you can always let us as council members know, but in terms of, you know, events that have occurred and may reapply, unless an event, you know, changes significantly, like it's asking for a new venue or it's grown significantly into another category, you know, they will reapply through the staff. So the staff will look at any input you guys have, positive or negative, on those events. And the chief person in charge of that is Kelly McInerney, the city executive assistant. But, you know, feel free to write us and let us know too. That sometimes helps us when we look at other new events that we're considering in the community. But staff looks at most of that. I did have a question because as a council, we're looking at those applications less. I did get a question about recycling at the Red Rock Arts Festival because I guess Solutions was approached maybe as little as 2 hours before the event, asking to help with recycling. And I just wanted a reminder, I recall from the last time I saw the application, we do have a space where organizers asked what their trash plan is, what their recycling plan is, you know, what their bathroom plan is. So I'm guessing, you know, we can kind of tick those off and answer as a city as well. So I'm just hoping we can address that from the city's end sooner than 2 hours in the future. And someone remind me, but I do seem to recall from the past that we as a council made a commitment that you know, we were going to walk the walk. So let us know if we can help.
Is it just that, so I know that there were items in recycling bins. Was it more that Sarah wanted to, or Solutions wanted to sort and then take to the center as opposed to
I don't know.
allowing
the email she sent me and the PowerPoint made it look like she inquired recently if there was a recycling plan, and I guess she was told there wasn't, so she said in 2 hours she managed to pull stuff together, so maybe it's more of a discussion to be had.
Probably the plan was just that the event was going to be using the city recycling bins.
Okay, well, maybe something to
But that's a
clarify.
good- that would be a good thing to clarify.
Yeah. That was it. Other than you guys have made me think now with this RAP discussion, I know we wanted to collect enough, you know, RAP monies to have enough to talk about, but I seem to recall since we started collecting in the spring that there was some discussion that by year end we would talk about formation of the committee because that'll take a while. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that was on someone's radar so we can let folks know how that process is going to work and how they can apply to be part of that.
Yes, I've been actively engaged with Grantwell, and there's been a lot of communication back and forth about the creation of that committee. They're well aware of the time frame, so I think that we are moving forward with that. It'll be in place, ready to send the money out.
Okay, cool. So if people in the community are interested, they should just kind of watch for us to post something about how they can get involved. Probably by year's end, or you think early next year?
Yeah, early next year.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Ronnie. Mike?
Not much to talk about. I've been traveling. First to Denver to rescue a family member who happily has been recovering from bone marrow cancer. It's a very big deal. 2 months been in the hospital, so he's finally getting to go back home to Durango, doing well. That's good. And then to visit a friend in Rochester, New York, where once again, I haven't been up there all that much, but I am so jealous at how much water they have back there. I mean, Rochester alone, just sitting at a brew pub, watching a Genesee River come down with more water than there is in our river that's supplying the entire Southwest out there. It's pretty stunning, and I'm pretty jealous. So, and not to mention Lake Ontario, which is, so anyway, that's, other than that, I was pretty much off, but thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Tawny?
Okay, I attended the Indigenous Peoples' Day ceremony yesterday, and it was very, very touching, and it was very, very beautiful. If you haven't attended before, I would recommend it because it was just really beautiful, I thought. I had an interview with Molly at KZMU on housing and specifically Walnut Lane yesterday. I don't know when that will be available. She hadn't put it together yet. And I had a really good conversation with Rihanna Medina at the Multicultural Center of just about just the climate in our community and what we can do to help and how we can assist each other. And she has some really good thoughts and ideas. I think we need to reach out more to her than we possibly have. And then I don't know if everybody has seen this or not. I believe I was sent an email at work this afternoon. On 10/26, there will be a Pat Creek Fire Workshop. Goes from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It starts at Old City Park Pavilion. It is there from 9 to 11, and then they actually move to the Pat Creek picnic area. There will be speakers most of the day. Lunch is provided if you RSVP. It is put on by USU, and there's more information on USU's website. And that's all I have.
You just reminded me, tomorrow at 6 p.m. is the redistricting meeting.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that. Thanks, Tawny. Karen?
Okay, so I attended the Mill Creek follow-up conversation with Betsy Byrne. And even though our grant has run out with the NPS, with the River Trails and Conservation Assistant Grant money, Betsy wanted to make sure that she hasn't left anything undone with the Mill Creek Committee. And I was asked to get a copy of the MOU between the county and the city law enforcement plan, because I think we're...
Oh, for the road?
So if I could get a hold of that from you, Carly, that'd be great. And then it was requested that that the county and the city write a letter, because the plan is going forward to BLM, that we support what was presented to us from the Mill Creek Committee. So Mary McGann and I will try to draft something up if everyone is in agreement to.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
just supporting the conclusion.
The conclusion of that plan, because the fear is that if we don't get a move on it soon, BLM has a host of projects in the pipeline, and they just
Yeah.
want to get it on the books.
That's great.
Okay, and then I had an airport board meeting. The employment numbers for September is at 3,087 compared to 2,672 in 2019, and then 1,757 passengers last year. There's a daily flight for October to Salt Lake every day at 12:30, and a daily flight to Denver at 10:40, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, there's also a second flight at 3 o'clock. Then I attended the last of the Everyday Counts Safety Summit series with the Federal Highway Administration. And the last topic was trying to emphasize the importance of making roadways safer and using countermeasures to include safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, cars, and transit. So, and the title is Road Diets, but they're, the presenters, there's quite a few Department of Transportation engineers, who were presenting around the nation and also transportation managers. And they want people to start getting away from talking about road diets because no one likes being on a diet, but calling it road buffets. So there's something for everyone. And the presentations that were shown show that you can increase capacity by offering options for bike lane. I mean, by reducing lanes for vehicles, and it's actually much safer. So that was great. And then just a heads up that Thursday at the high school auditorium, there will be a community event about suicide prevention. And Kevin Hines is an award-winning brain, mental health, and suicide prevention activist, and he will be sharing his story of hope and empathy, and absolutely everyone is welcome. It's at 6:30, and there's a free dinner at 5:30. And that is it.
Thanks, Karen. Kaylin?
I attended the last part of Street Fest. It was super fun, lots of locals there. One comment that I received was, wow, seems like we should do more of these. It was, perhaps it was a little bit louder than it needed to be, so maybe a little bit more attention could be paid to how loud music needs to be at a party, but thought it was a worthwhile event. Attended a Moab Dark Skies meeting. We discussed the streetlight conversion. Milo reported that Rocky Mountain Power will not be able to do a sample streetlight installation before we make a decision, so we discussed strategies for figuring out what would be the appropriate units to get installed at different locations, but it seems like there'll be more work on that. I attended a travel council meeting. Biga did a great presentation introducing the work of the Film Commission to the travel council and the economic benefits of that work. And that sort of rolled into a discussion about the travel council's doing more work this year on really putting some thought into a list of budget priorities, recommendations to the county commission. And a couple of items of note. So there's different groupings of things that have to be spent on particular categories. And one of them is establishing and promoting recreation film and conventions that projected for next county budget year is $622,000. And they sounds like they're going to recommend funding Film Commission at number 2, which will bump the Sustainable Rec Program down to number 3 out of a list of 5 things.
So is that for sure? Are they?
It's a recommendation to the county commission, but it seems like August is on board with it, and the commissioners, I haven't talked to them in a while, but some commissioners seem game to basically take whatever community expenditures can be paid for with TRT and pay for them with TRT.
And when do they pass their budget, so we know whether or not we need to have a conversation about the Film Commission?
Well, I think it might be good to have a conversation. Carly prepared a very nice memo for Chris in August. So it seems like that's a conversation that's ongoing now, but it seems like there may be a negotiation about, there's like just the basic financial, the dollars that go in. But then there's other things like the office space and assortment of physical assets and how those are managed. And August did ask me, is having the county fully take it on and pay for everything a hard line, or would we flex it all? And I didn't really know, but I did say that having the city participate on in-kind items might be an easier contribution than us continuing to fund it in a significant way.
County budget runs calendar year.
That's why I was saying, if they're calendar year and we've only funded half, when do they pass their budget? December?
Yeah.
So we'll know whether or not
Well, but I mean, they're in their budgeting process, and it's a negotiation.
Yeah.
So it'd be good to continue your engagement with them. Another thing to continue engagement on is that out of their TRCC funds, which are projected at 1.5 million, and I'll just read from this summary, the body resolved to recommend the following 2 items should funds be available following expenditure on already allocated items. 1, purchase of a community stage for the Moab Folk Festival, and 2, development of pickleball courts. So it sounds like if you're talking to them about Film Commission, that it'll also be good to collaborate on how those things might get split up and funded, because it seems like the community stage would be a really good community asset. But again, there may be, so the TRCC funds can be spent on capital costs, whereas other things, the TRT can't necessarily be. So, and I'm not sure what the already allocated items are and how much there might be left over, but again, there may be county funds that could be really available to significantly help with that project.
Yeah.
Another thing at Travel Council was that, and I don't know if you might be able to chime in on this, Karen, but the FAA is in the process of doing an air tour management plan for a number of national parks, but also including Arches and Canyonlands. And their comment period ended earlier this month, so it's basically in the hands of the FAA now. But it sounds like there will be a little bit tighter controls on it than it has been in the past, for better or worse. It seems like from tourism standpoint, it's not good, but from some people's perspective, that might be an improvement. I participated.
Are you thinking there's going to be any action on the part of this council on that?
No, I mean,
Like a letter or whatever? 'Cause it's
it
already
seems like,
passed, right?
you know, it was the first I'd heard of it. I don't know enough to say, but I did look it up online afterwards, and the comment period is over.
It's over, so,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. That's what I thought too.
Would I be able to comment on that?
Please.
Is that, so we had the operations manager for Red Tail Aviation Red Tail, their operations is mostly based on scenic flights. And so in the past, back in 2014, the flight number was about 389 flights that they had permitted use to go over Arches National Park. So this new plan, and what the chagrin to these flight police operators is that they have not been invited to be a part of the decision process. And what has happened is that the proposal is to bring the flight numbers down to 301 scenic flights for the year. And Red Tail has already hit those numbers back in September. And a lot of what is happening is because there's so many crowding and closures at our national park that people are calling day of because they really want to see the park. And the feeling is that there is no impacts on the park itself. You know, there's no trash, there's no, need for more rangers and whatnot. So they're trying to see if there's any way that those numbers could be increased, because they actually used an average, and that average had also included COVID, which there was no flights. And so, and Red Tail has made significant investments in their airplanes to do these scenic flights, and they haven't had any complaints with noise, because all complaints from the Arches, for the national parks goes directly to the FBO, and they haven't had any in 5 years. And so there is, there are some the concern on their bottom line, and so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for those details.
Yep.
It was presented in the travel council meeting, but I didn't get it all down.
Gotcha.
I participated in 4 visioning consultant interviews, and I attended the Community Renewable Energy Agency board meeting, and that's moving forward with various internal housekeeping things, hiring legal counsel for the upcoming negotiations with Rocky Mountain Power and the Public Utilities Commission, and advising on the program development. Also extending the date for eligible communities to join a little bit, because if you'll recall that setting a 100% renewable by 2030 resolution was a prerequisite for participating in this program. The deadline for that has passed, but there's a number of communities that made that pass that resolution but haven't committed to joining the CREAB yet. So I've been meaning to talk to you, Mayor, if you have any contacts in these uncommitted communities.
Is Mill Creek one of them? Because I feel like there was a.
No, I think Mill Creek joined.
They're committed. Yeah,
Yeah.
They're committed.
Jeff Silvestrini's very involved. They actually help craft the ILA.
If you want to give me a list, I can
Yeah.
make some phone calls.
Great.
Because the more that join, the lower our price tag, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
for the development costs.
happy to
Like,
call.
Yeah. That's what I've got.
Thanks, Kaylin. Thanks, council. Thanks, Carly. We will move on to, do we have? Her? We should have Michelle. We should have Michelle? Nora? Not yet.
I know, I'm just gonna set up it.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
That's okay. Ooh, this is very meta. What's happening here?
Is she gonna use?
She's on Zoom,
Okay,
so
so
I'll wait, but I'm not sure if she can hear us, if she's muted. Michelle, can you hear us?
yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey,
Can we make her the big face?
we can.
I don't know what else to call that.
Just give me
The larger view. Welcome, Michelle. Thanks for being patient as we got our technology together.
There we go.
Awesome.
course.
Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much for having me. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and then get this going. There we go. Can everybody see my PowerPoint okay?
It's great. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So again, thanks so much for having me and inviting me for tonight. I'm Michelle Rabine. I am the manager at the Mosquito Abatement District here in Moab. I have my PhD in environmental science. I am also a certified associate ecologist to the Ecological Society of America. I started at the district in May of this year, and I've been doing research on mosquitoes since 2014. So tonight I'm going to just briefly talk about Aedes aegypti that have reappeared here in Moab, as well as how to prevent not just this mosquito, but other mosquitoes, as well as protect against mosquito bites. So we might think of mosquitoes as being the world's most annoying animal, but they're actually the world's deadliest animal. So you can see from the image here from the World Health Organization that the mosquito comes out on top at being responsible for about 700 and 2,500,000 deaths of humans each year. And so that's because they're responsible for carrying so many different diseases and viruses and pathogens that do end up targeting humans. And you can see on this picture on the right here too that mosquitoes kill nearly 200,000 more humans than the rest of the animals listed on this photo combined. So just some brief information about mosquitoes in general before I dive into Aedes aegypti. So they do have a 4-stage life cycle, which is pictured here on the right-hand side. It's an image from the CDC, and it actually represents their life cycle very well. They have the 4 stages. 3 undergo development in an aquatic habitat. So they always start as an egg, and then when temperature and conditions are right, the eggs hatch out into larvae. The larva then develops into a pupa, and then after a few days, they emerge into an adult. And of course, I think we're all pretty familiar with the adults being terrestrial and are so often buzzing around and irritating us and causing us many issues. And as a reminder too, the female mosquitoes are the only ones that actually take a blood meal from us. So Aedes aegypti are a very serious invasive issue and a mosquito that obviously is non-native to the area, so they have no natural predator. Aedes aegypti are a container breeding mosquito, so it's exactly what it sounds like. They will take any opportunity to lay their eggs and develop. The larva will develop in any type of container or receptacle that will hold water, which can be from rainwater or irrigation and other things like that. So this mosquito can lay up to 100 eggs at a time, and she can actually lay her eggs, or can lay eggs, up to 3 times during their lifetime. So, 100 times 3, that's a lot of mosquitoes. And then if you think about the offspring, if they survive and then continue to produce as well, that becomes a big issue. And something unique about the Aedes mosquitoes is that the eggs can actually lay dormant for months and sometimes even years in dry conditions, which causes an even bigger issue for areas. So Aedes aegypti over the years has kind of adapted to human life and has evolved to be more domesticated. And so it actually has been able to figure out how to get into people's homes and can cohabitate very well with people. And this is due to rapid human population growth, urbanization, not to mention that ways of travel patterns and transportation modes have also really increased over the years as well. And because of this and of the Aedes aegypti being able to figure out how to get into people's homes, they have actually learned to really love people. So they prefer to bite us over any other animal that's out there, and they're very aggressive. So they can and will bite us many times, and they'll do anything in order to take that blood meal. And this picture here is actually a really good example of what the eggs look like. So they're very, very small. They're about the size of a number 2 pencil tip and as thin as a credit card. And they stick like glue to different substrates inside the container. So it's really important to be able to figure out ways to reduce the eggs and then the mosquito, the adult as well. So why exactly is this mosquito so significant and so important for us? Well, the word Aedes, it's actually Greek for unpleasant, and unpleasant this mosquito sure is. So it's known as the yellow fever mosquito, and it can also has the ability to transmit not just yellow fever virus, but others such as Zika, dengue, and chikungunya. Currently, there are no vaccines for Zika and chikungunya. There is a vaccine for yellow fever, and there is a vaccine for dengue. However, in order to receive the dengue vaccine, you must be between the ages of 9 and 45, and it's only available in certain countries. And the World Health Organization also recommends that in order to get the vaccine, you should have already been infected with the dengue virus. And this is because if you get it before any type of infection, and then you do get infected, it could actually create a more severe infection for you. So there's not really a win-win situation here. And just another reason for us to, be aware of this mosquito and protecting ourselves against these types of viruses that it can carry. So here in Moab, Aedes aegypti first appeared in 2019. So this was before I came on with the district. And it wasn't collected at all in 2020. And then now this season at the end of August, we ended up collecting what just started as 2 from one business property, which was actually a tire yard, which is a prime example of a habitat for these mosquitoes since they are container mosquitoes. And unfortunately, the number grew from 2 to over 230 adults, which ended up being mostly found around residential properties, homes and yards and things like that. So here at the Mosquito Abatement District, we use something that's called integrated mosquito management. So this means that we use a lot of different techniques, methods, and modes of action in order to reduce the mosquitoes that we have here in Moab. And so that could be biological, physical, chemical controls. So we'll always try and look for larvae and do larval surveillance and treatment first, as well as a combination of the adult surveillance, and then if we have to, adult treatments as well. So with all these combined efforts, and our crew worked really hard, we actually knocked down this mosquito significantly. Within our traps just the other week, we only had a handful of these mosquitoes. So I think that's pretty good, especially with us being such a small district as well. And of course, now that we're entering into mid-October, today was especially chilly. The temperatures are going to be dropping, which is really going to work in our favor to reduce this mosquito, at least for this season. And we are having samples being prepared to get sent out to the Utah Public Health Laboratory for Zika virus testing. Right now, UPHL only has capabilities to test for Zika. They are not able yet to test for chikungunya or dengue, but at least we can find out whether this virus was circulating or not within the population. And then we are having samples being sent to Yale University for population genetic analysis, which will actually be able to tell us if the mosquitoes that we collected here at the end of this season in August was a brand new introduction from somewhere else, or if they were perhaps remnants from the 2019 population that we did end up collecting. So there's lots of different things that we can do to protect ourselves as well as prevent mosquitoes from growing or developing in our own yards. This image here is from CDC, and they lay out some really great general information that's easy for anybody to do. One of the things is be aware of when you're outside. Different types of mosquitoes can be out at different times of the day, so just make sure you are aware of your surroundings, aware of if mosquitoes are out biting you. And so leading to that, use EPA registered insect repellent. So this could include DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, as well as wearing light colored and long sleeve shirts and long pants. The CDC also says you can treat your clothing for extra protection with permethrin. And then of course, making sure that your windows, your doors are sealed properly, your screens don't have holes in them, because again, think back to what I said about this mosquito being domesticated. It is really able to figure out how to get into people's homes. So continuing on with our prevention, there's lots of different ways. A lot of this stuff might seem common sense, but we just might not think about it all the time, or think of these areas or containers of being places that mosquitoes can grow in. So you really want to make sure that you're emptying, removing, dumping any types of containers that can be holding standing water. And make sure you're refreshing water, if it's in pet dishes or bird baths, and even scrubbing the sides and bottoms. And you can see from the picture here that's circled with the white, those are Aedes eggs on a plant container. So they're so tiny and it almost resembles soil or dirt on the sides of these. So they're hard to mistake. So just make sure you're keeping an eye out for those. And just other simple things too, like checking your roof gutters, inspecting your yards for if there's holes in trees. This mosquito will also take advantage of that, so you can fill that in. And if you do have ornamental ponds, go ahead and stock them with mosquito-eating fish. Again, this mosquito really only needs a teaspoon of water to develop, so check out everything. And then, of course, two of the most important things, reporting and responsibility. So, definitely let us know if you're being bit by mosquitoes, whether it's on your property or elsewhere when you're out and about. And if there's standing water that's too large for you to drain or dump, give us a call. We can check out to see if there's any larvae there. And mosquito control at the end of the day is a shared responsibility. So, please make sure that you're taking responsibility for your own yard, home, property, because at the end of the day, it is your own health in your hands. And, if you guys are interested in any more information or resources, you can contact us. And then the CDC and EPA has some really great information, not just on Aedes aegypti, but West Nile virus, other diseases, as well as other tips on prevention. So thank you again so much. I'm glad I could come and talk to you guys tonight.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for zooming in, and thanks for the information and how we can get in touch with you. info@moabmad.org. Is that what that was?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Ugh. All right. We didn't approve the minutes. So Section 8, approval of the minutes for September 28, our special and our September 28 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
I will move and approve for September 28th, both the minutes for the special meeting and the regular meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. New business 9-1, proposed resolution 33-2021 to formally initiate proceedings to amend the Moab Municipal Code, section 17.45, R2 single household and 2 household residential zone, 17.48, R3 multi-household residential zone, 17.51, R4 manufactured residential zone, to add a requirement that new residential development of more than 2 households be subject to a requirement that some of the units must qualify as active employment households and or subject to deed restrictions regulating the use of the units as workforce housing.
Hey,
Nora, welcome.
thank you. So I know there were a number of questions about this, and this afternoon today, I sent out a response, question and answer to all of the city council members. So I hope you got that, but I'm going to go over it as a part of this presentation so that you all have the same amount of information. So we have noticed in the planning department a trend, and that trend is that we're getting asked by all kinds of people, a lot of developers from the Wasatch Front, about building multifamily housing. And there are a number of parcels that people are looking at in the R3 zone. An example of that is the Jake Satterfield property that is requesting a rezone to R3 so that they can put in a whole bunch of townhomes and apartments. And there are a number of them, parcels in the R3 zone that are being looked at. And several of them actually have existing mobile homes on them. And the proposal is to scrape those, eliminate those, and then build townhomes. And the way property values are in Moab, the most profitable thing to do right now is a luxury townhomes for second homeowners or primary homeowners, depending, but primarily targeted towards second homeowners. And we're not getting employee or workforce housing out of our zoning at this point in time. I know there was an effort several years ago to densify the R3 zone, and I totally support that. Right now, what's allowed basically is 20.7 units per acre in the R3 zone. Given the amount of parking that's required in our code and the maximum building height, it's unlikely that anybody can even achieve that. I mean, it would be an engineering feat in order to actually shoehorn that onto a piece of property. Nonetheless, people can max out the site as much as they can, and there's absolutely no requirement for any kind of affordability. And just to, and I included this in your packet, and it's pretty small for the audience, I apologize, but this is just a list, and we've gotten some more since this was created. This is 9/15. Since then, I think there are at least 2 more parcels that are being discussed for multifamily. So what we did is when we had an actual application on file, we listed it. Otherwise, we just kept it generic. And once we receive a pre-application or an application, then we will go ahead and identify who the developer is, because then it becomes public information. But as you can see, we've had quite a number of people inquiring about multifamily in the R3 zone. Some of them are apartments. Most of them are townhomes. We have the 5th one down, multi-household development site plan application. Actually, the one above that. Where did it go? Anyway, there's one parcel that is looking at multifamily in the form of, here we go, multifamily development, 40 units, bunkhouse apartments, and a 4-plex. And that we actually have an application for. That's on Mill Creek Drive, 960 Mill Creek Drive, and it's Colin Fryer, and it's for his employees. And we have received an application that's in the review process right now. Many of the other ones are townhomes, which means higher end generally. Their townhomes are really, really popular in the Salt Lake Valley right now, and I wish I had taken pictures last time I was up there. But they can be pretty dense, in some cases 20 feet wide for each little unit. And the model is that you, there's an alley between two sets of garages, and you drive in the garage and into your little garage, and then you go upstairs, and then the living space is on the next 2 floors, and you never have an opportunity to see your neighbors. So, well, it's a townhouse. It's basically a row house, and the way they're being designed right now is most of it's pavement because it's so car-centric, with each dwelling having a 2-car garage. That's pretty typical of what's going in, and I encourage you, if you're going to be in the Salt Lake Valley or Utah Valley, check out some of the new developments. It's pretty amazing what they're doing.
So, excuse me, Nora, one quick question. So townhomes like you've described, a cluster of them all built within one shell, for example, would be considered a multi-family development then? A multi-household development?
Well, it's a multi-household development. Bunkhouses are allowed, but there are also other pieces to that. Like they're doing 12 multifamily, 2 and 3 bedroom, I think they're 2-bedroom units that would be rented to families, for example. And then they're doing a couple of apartments that are attached to sort of the main structure that are for women, the women in the crew. And then they have a real bunkhouse type of situation. It's like, well, I've always known them referred to as man camp, but it has a whole bunch of little studio, just bedrooms, and then common bathrooms. And all of the kitchen facilities will be in a common building. Okay. So, anyway, and the Planning Commission will be reviewing that before too long.
I've always thought man camp referred to a cluster of trailers that were brought onto site for extractive industry use.
Yes, it is.
I've never referred to, at least in Moab, a bunkhouse in that manner.
I'm sorry, I missed that last.
Just in Moab, I haven't I haven't heard that referred to in Moab.
And the bunkhouse basically is from an extraction site, and they're moving. So it's that kind of it's a modular building. But anyway, we'll get into the details of that later. But that is moving forward, and that one will be true workforce housing, which is really great, and we're thrilled that Mr. Fryer is moving forward with that project. Many of the other ones, we've started talking to them about affordability issues and workforce housing requirements, and some people are more receptive to it than others. But this just demonstrates the amount of interest that we have. And as I said, we got another couple today, or we've been talking to people for another couple of projects, and there's a lot of interest. It's like the big thing now is to go to Moab and try to find a piece of property and build apartments or townhomes. And we get multiple phone calls for each property that's on the market. So, this is just a demonstration that there's a lot of interest in this. Great. With that, and with the recent development that we've seen of townhomes in the R3 zone and other zones, right now we're just trying to deal with residential zones. We've seen, as currently written, there's no incentive for them or no requirement for folks to provide employee or workforce housing units. So we have been talking about various ideas, methods to move forward so that we can correct this and we can encourage more workforce housing. So what this does is it invokes the pending ordinance doctrine, which allows, there's a section in state code which allows an exception to the vested right definitions and requirements in the state code. A vested right is basically, once you have a complete application, then you are subject to the code that was in effect at the time the application was filed. And this is what we've gone through with the hotels that were still kind of lingering and had applications on files when we did the moratorium on OAs. So we could accept an application, but we would send a notice out to everyone that submits an application that says, we are revising we are in the process of revising the code, and you may be subject to those revisions. And this is something that is permissible, it's an exception. And I included a link to the Ombudsman's office. There's a number of advisory opinions, and one of them has to do with there's several cases and several Ombudsman's opinions about pending ordinance. So I gave you that. So what this does is it's a resolution that defines, we already adopted a code change that set up a process for establishing initiation of code amendments. And we just added that about, I don't know, 6-8 months ago, something like that. So now we're doing it. And this resolution basically forecasts your intent to work on residential zoning. It's tricky.
It does not make it, so it just opens the door for the consideration, and then we go through the process.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we need to give it enough specificity so people really understand what we're talking about, but we don't know what we're going to do yet, so we can't really say that, and we want to have a public process that goes along with this. So that's why I'm recommending that this be considered as a resolution to go ahead and initiate those so that we can work with future developers and try to make sure that if we make changes that they are willing to participate in those changes. And we've been throwing around ideas, and we need to do some good public engagement on this. I think business owners would be interested in being involved because their employees don't have anywhere to live or they can't hire people. Certainly we need to talk to the development community and the real estate community who any changes we make to the current R3 zone is going to be controversial. There's no doubt about it. But, I think we need to do a really good job of letting Moab know that this is an issue that we all are suffering from. And we need to come up with solutions and be real solution oriented. And, we can talk about various alternatives. What we're thinking about at this point is a certain percentage of the number of units that are proposed would have to qualify as workforce housing, or as we're now calling it,
Employment housing, active
Yes.
employment housing?
yes, active employment housing. And that comes right from the county's code. And that's what they talked about when they were looking at Arroyo Crossing. But we could end up doing actual deed restrictions relative to income. We have an issue in that there are many people, our AMI in Moab is pretty low, so the average income is pretty low. And so many of our service workers, they're making $17, $20 an hour, make too much according to the affordability criteria that are often set forth for moderate, low, very low. So just by doing a financial requirement and deed restriction, we're not necessarily getting at a lot of the folks that need to find places to live. So that's why we're talking more about occupancy rather than necessarily ownership. We will have that discussion as a part of all of this.
Yeah. Yep.
But, it's a starting point.
So all this really does is this initiates the proceedings that we're going forward. We're not
Right.
discussing details tonight.
Nope.
We're not
Yep.
doing, so this is just,
And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Great, thank you.
well, is
Tell me
there a
that.
proposed resolution in here, Nora? I cannot
Yeah.
So the
Resolution 33
number 3, 33-2021.
Or if you're on the full packet, it's page
Maybe
16.
I'm looking in the wrong place.
It's right under background.
If somebody else can find it, go ahead.
What's
I
the one
didn't
that's in the
see
motion?
a recommended motion, but it doesn't seem necessary. Would you like the entire title of the,
For this, I would, yes.
okay. I move to approve resolution number 33-2021 to formally initiate proceedings to amend the Moab Municipal Code, MMC, section 17.45, R2 single household and two household residential zone, 17.48, R3 multi-household residential zone, 17.51, R4 manufactured residential zone, to add a requirement that new residential development of more than two households be subject to a requirement that some of the units must qualify as active employment households and/or subject to deed restrictions regulating the use of the units as workforce housing.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kaylin, and thank you, Tani. Discussion. I want to just kind of pump the brakes on too much discussion here,
Absolutely.
only because I think Nora was very clear about, like, we may have questions about what we will be deciding.
Right.
But I think the majority of our questions are TBA,
Yeah, exactly.
TBD. But for tonight, the most important thing is that we're just initiating.
That's correct.
So what that means is developers will be notified that if something does pass, that they're going to be on the hook for something, but it doesn't determine
Specify what.
whether or not that would be the case.
And Ronnie, I
Ronnie?
did do a Q&A.
Yeah,
with your
got it,
questions
thanks.
And my questions.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will give you, there will be some answers, but most of them we will determine along the way.
Yeah. So I just have a few other things just for my colleagues. So we're constantly talking about how we have a housing crisis. So I'm just curious. I know it's possible to look at other zones after this, but does anyone feel like we should just be doing this in all zones where we have housing? Because I understand we're seeing a push in R3, but what I don't know is if the push is then going to move. And so I don't know, maybe that's something you address once you start the 6 months, but then also the minute we sign off on this, we start the 6-month process. So one of our struggles in the past has been just having only 6 months and getting down to the wire where we have to turn something around. And so I figure we're looking at mid-April and we have some hiring and such to do. So I just want to make sure everybody feels like we're ready to prioritize this and we know we're setting up and committing the new council to hit the ground running on this. And then just, yeah, so the public understands. Like, I think this is long overdue and it's a good thing. But as I think it often isn't clear to the public, they think you pass something like this and all of a sudden anybody who owns property has to start building a lot of affordable housing. And you need to understand that just because, say, I owned a lot, it doesn't force me to build something on there. It doesn't mean that this is for, you know, if I'm building more than two household size development. So I might just decide I can make more money by building 2 units and not do any that are affordable. So just know there are good things about it, but it isn't necessarily gonna, you aren't gonna blink and see that change. So that was just the thing I wanted to throw out to colleagues was, yeah, those 2 things.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments?
For me, Nora, and I would really love to see this in the planning department, is just to figure out what our growth management quota is. And so, like, how many units do we need? Because we keep talking about having workforce housing, but we haven't had that study done since Zachariah left the county and, I mean, over 3 years ago. And, I mean, at that point, there was a number being thrown around, and I just, if we had an idea of what it is that we were trying to accomplish instead of just opening it all up, and what percentage are we looking, you know, like with, in Banff in Canada, they had a percentage of units that they wanted to have in comparison to overnight rentals and second homes, and
Right.
trying to gauge what that amount is for residential units, because, you know, we could, theoretically open this all up and, you know, there's all these mountain communities that are dealing with the Zoom encroachment of people moving from all over. So, and how do we, you know, how do you say that active workforce is not as important as ones that are here? So just trying to establish, if you're working, you know, like, and there's information in here that you have to be working for a local company.
That's what we're thinking at this point. That definition could also change.
Okay.
But it's just an idea of what that's trying to emphasize is that we're not talking necessarily about a financial deed restriction like we required in the PAD, that we want to provide additional flexibility to that. But we don't know what that looks like yet, and that's why that we need to do a public process on it. In terms of the background numbers, we know there's an issue. We know the longer we put it off, the bigger the issue is going to be, because everybody's going to come in and file an application. And that's what's happening right now. So what we're trying to do is get in front of that wave a little bit. And we could, you know, I could look at the studies that were done in 2018 and see if we can come up with some numbers based upon that information and try to update them.
That would work, and that would dovetail nice in this process and during this 6-month notification. Kaylin?
So I neglected to mention that I also attended a housing task force meeting, and there is an awareness, and that group was originally formed to a large part to help create that housing plan that has, the one that you mentioned was basically the second iteration. And we've been aware that the numbers need to be updated, and we're kind of waiting for the census data to come out, since that's part of the basis for the quantitative analysis, and that has come out. So a committee was formed to basically move the process of coming out with version 3, because we are aware that up-to-date information is needed. That said, with the 2016 version, it was identified that we need 1,000 units by 2050 of affordable housing. And so even with what's in the pipeline now, primarily in the county, I don't think this effort is going to overshoot that mark by any means. And hopefully we'll have better data. And then I'd just like to respond to Ronnie's first question, and I share that concern. As I was reviewing this table before the meeting, it occurred to me, I've kind of like written off commercial zones because of the exclusion of the first floor. But in thinking about it, it's like, if you build 2 stories of housing, then you can use up most of the first floor just with parking. And I think that hasn't been the highest and best use historically because of the commercial can be used for lodging, which is more lucrative, but maybe as the months roll by without us allowing lodging, maybe property owners are looking at other alternatives.
And they are.
Yeah.
You know, there's some properties, quite a few properties in the C4. They could, you know, there are certainly other uses that they could probably do to make more money, but there are people who really want to do this in the C4. And there is a provision for multifamily housing in the C4. There's some development standards. And I agree, it's probably worth a look at that too, in terms of how much time we have, and I think what our immediate need is. I think looking at the R3 and the R4 is our first step. And then certainly we can look at the other zones as well.
But if you wanted to make that notification, you could see about amending the motion to include all zones in the city. But that would...
There's no way we could get that even
Again,
close
that's
to
a
being done in
workload.
6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not realistic, but you know, you could add some language that says, and we may explore we may explore the situation in the commercials and other zones as well.
Well, because then it would be a notification.
Well-
This is all about the
Yeah,
notification.
we would need to have that in the motion.
Right, we would
Right.
have to include that. So who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, so, and then who was the second?
I did.
Okay, so it's up to you if you want to amend you. Better ask Tawny if that's okay.
Well, it seems like adding a language that we may explore it. I mean, the point that we may or may not explore it, whether or not notification is given, capacity
Right.
given. It's just a matter of whether or not we definitely include it as part of this resolution.
Like it may be included in the resolution, but that we don't put it as a high priority in the workload. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's one option, and based on what Nora said about the capacity, that's the reality. Or we not include it in the resolution, and Nora sees if she can do some work on it in the process, but.
What do you want to do?
Yeah, you don't want to like just throw it in there and then we have like the 6 months where we have the ability to make those changes in the pending ordinance doctrine, and then we don't get to this commercial zones and then we like run out of time. Does
Okay.
that make sense? You want to
And-
be strategic.
And how soon could we have so if we fail
Yeah.
to make changes in the commercial zones, and we've noticed it in this resolution, is there some amount of time, gap until we could do
Like we
another
start a
resolution?
different one?
Before start a
Probably.
different one?
I'm gonna definitely ask our land use attorney about that, because, like, we can start another one midway through this one, because it's about different zones, so it's not like we're restarting the process. That's my understanding, so
Because
so
it
let's
sounds.
double check. Yeah.
Right. It sounds like there may be a risk that if we include the commercial zones and fail to act on them, then we would not get it done.
Right,
And there would be an additional period of time in which,
yeah, we probably wouldn't be able to say, like, never mind on commercial, let's do it later. Once we notice it, like, pending ordinance probably applies. Like, I haven't looked into it, but it just seems like basic fairness that we can't perpetually have all of these pending ordinances going.
Yeah,
So-
I'm concerned because some of the projects in the C4 make sense to move forward, and I don't want to hold them up, quite frankly. And they're willing to do deed restrictions of some sort, and we're working with them. So, I have a little bit of discomfort with that,
okay.
but it's up to you guys for sure.
So I think my preference would be to informally direct staff to get more information on the parameters around using this tool, or also how, using a TZO.
Does that
For
sound okay with
commercial only?
council?
Yeah,
Just that sort of informal direction? Does anyone have heartburn over that? Okay, well then the motion would stay as is. And,
Oh,
any
I was just
other-
going to add, if it helps anyone, I did open up my affordable housing plan, and for at least anticipated unit needs, at the time when we wrote that for, let me see, if this is new or, new housing units, so we're thinking like, to purchase across the spectrum from less than 30% AMI to more than 100% AMI was 1,024 units, and for rental units by 2030, 323. So somewhere to start. We know it needs updating, but.
well, and we've seen growth in business, for sure. So that study was based on, numbers of employees needed in 2018, which we know has grown since then. So it's definitely not gone down. Okay, so any
Mayor.
other comments?
So
Mike?
may I put in my 2 bits worth on
Sure,
this subject
yep,
real quick? First of all, if we want to look at the old studies and so forth and bring them up to date, fine. But knowing how things change continually, I'm not going to put a lot of faith in whatever numbers we put in. We just went through a water sewer rate study today where just 2 years ago, we basically admitted that we didn't get it right. So whatever numbers we may come up with, I'm personally not going to have a lot of confidence. I agree with Kaylin's statement that whatever it is we build, it's not likely to be enough. So there's that, and I would personally prefer to stick to Nora's original text here, R2, 3, and 4, just to keep life simple, I agree with Ronnie that if we're already going down that road now, arguing about this and this and that, and I'm afraid that if we try to broaden it all, the zones, and try to accommodate the many variations across the zones, that we're not going to get it done in 6 months' time. And I would rather keep it simple and get something done. That's my
Okay.
preference.
Okay. Any other comments?
So what?
I
so
was
does
going to call for
everybody
the
know what
vote.
the motion is?
The motion
Yeah,
hasn't
the
been
original-
amended.
Okay.
The original motion and
The original
seconded by
motion.
Tawny. Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And now 9.2, proposed ordinance 2021-16, an ordinance amending the text of the Moab Municipal Code to allow ADUs in all residential zones subject to a revised section 17.70, accessory dwelling units, and 17.06.202, definitions. Nora, did you also want to present on this?
Yes,
Okay.
so, the ADUs is something that the planning commission has been talking about for a couple months. I'm trying to memorize exactly for here it is. And the purpose of it, as I mentioned in the staff report, there are two things that have happened one thing that's happened that requires us to open back up our ADU code section. And that's HB 82, which was approved last year by the state legislature. And it requires us to allow interior accessory dwelling units and just allow them basically to move forward. There's limitations on what we can ask them to do in terms of building code improvements. There are some that we can, but by and large, we don't have an awful lot to say about how these things are configured. There can be no maximum size for them. So we had to amend our code in order to address that, which was the genesis of this. Then what we thought we'd do is, while we were looking at this section, to try to evaluate if there are barriers in our current code language that are keeping people from moving forward building ADUs. And as our experience over the last few years has shown that, our lots are pretty small, and if you have a 5,000 square foot lot and you have a 12-foot rear setback and a 15, 20-foot front setback and 7 or 8 foot side setbacks, that buildable area becomes pretty small. There are fire separations that are required if you're doing an external ADU between the house, and it's just tough to fit them on lots. So we talked with them at length about allowing some encroachment into those setbacks for a structure that's no larger than 20 feet, no taller than 20 feet. And requiring some minimum fire separations. And we hope that encourages, there's a few lots that we think that it'll make it easier for people to move forward and build these things. And that's the win. And so those were kind of the two things that jumped out at us. And then as we were reviewing the rest of that section, we had wide-ranging discussions with the Planning Commission about how many ADUs per lot should be allowed, or will we allow a duplex with an ADU, or should larger lots have the ability to do more ADUs or bigger ADUs? What size do we want to put on external ADUs? All those kinds of things were discussed. And the Planning Commission basically went from, and Kaya Marienfeld this year, that certainly can answer questions, but they started out thinking doors, 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 because that's what we all think we need, just more and more affordable housing, employee workforce housing. So, at one time the Planning Commission said, well, however many can fit on there, basically, and just the setbacks in the building height would be the constraints. We talked that through a little bit, and my explanation to the Planning Commission basically is that this is one tool in our toolbox, and an important tool, and a tool that we really want to encourage, but it's one thing, and it can't solve all the problems. And my fear is a total change of community character if we start allowing multiple ADUs on residential lots that are relatively small. And then all of a sudden, we've really densified things, and it's a significant change in my mind. So we talked through a number of issues, and where we came up is the code that is presented to you tonight. And there were a lot of questions and answers, which is really great. And some of the questions may take some additional research. And certainly if you have questions or concerns or want more information, you certainly don't have to pass this tonight. You can continue it and ask us to provide some additional information. But I will go through the changes briefly and then discuss the things that the Planning Commission struggled with the most. First, I'm going to go to the question and answer. These are Ronnie's questions. There's discussion about, I see this as being contemplated in the R zones. Do we have homes in the C zones? Was there discussion about allowing those homeowners to do an IADU or EADU should they desire to? And my response is, yeah, we do have some single families in commercial zones. But right now, we really want to get at the residential district zones. And certainly in the future, we could look at the commercial zones if they wish to do, if they continue to do single family housing, which is rare. But we do have some instances of single family housing in our commercial zones. In terms of impact fees, there is a question about, do we charge impact fees? It has been our policy for ADUs not to necessarily require separate utilities. There have to, according to building code, there have to be some ventilation separation. So if you have an interior ADU, you have to, you need fresh air to both the units, and you can't be exchanging stuff. And so that is a building code issue that would have to be addressed. But right now, if you are building a new ADU, whether it be internal or external, we generally don't require a second hookup. We just need to make sure that the capacity in the existing lines is adequate, and then they have to pay the fee for however much the usage is. And it leaves the burden on the property owner to decide how he or she wants to pay for that. Sometimes they go ahead and charge the tenant, sometimes they don't, they can do whatever they wish. But there's not necessarily a requirement for a second hookup, which requires an impact fee. In some cases, there may be, where there's not adequate capacity right now. And in that case, they would have to pay the impact fee. And I can talk to Mark Jolissant a little more about this. And he calculates many of our fees for us in the engineering department, impact fees, and I have not had an opportunity to really chat with him about this, but certainly I could do that. Planning Commission's logic in requiring that the owner of a home in which an IADU is built to be primary resident, but not putting the same primary resident requirement on a homeowner building an EADU. That is the case. That's what's proposed. I think that the thinking is we're just trying to avoid conflict and future nuisance issues. And if you've got somebody living right above and below somebody else, and it's just two monthly rentals basically, and the primary owner is not living there, is that an ADU or is it just a duplex that rents 2 units? And so our recommendation to the Planning Commission was in the case of an IADU, the owner should really live there if they're going to rent out the bottom so that they can kind of control what's going on. For external ADUs, it becomes less of a concern. Most ADUs, the way they work is the owner has to live on site somewhere, either in the ADU unit or in the main unit, And again, that's just to try to preserve that neighborhood character, not create those external impacts that sometimes comes with more rental units. But you're certainly welcome to have that discussion.
Can I ask a question now, Nora, or should we keep going?
Let me go through
Okay.
these and then we can certainly go back. There's a whereas, workforce housing and employee housing. It's kind of interchangeable. We just want to make sure that we discuss the broadest possible application for employee affordable housing. What we're really trying to get is tenancy for people who work in Moab or have worked in Moab or are retiring, or for a family member. So that is the intent of that. In terms of, I couldn't tell what page 30 of your packet was because I just opened things individually from the agenda. So I am not sure exactly what you're discussing, but we do have enforcement is now handled through our city's code compliance officer. And what normally happens is somebody complains and we go follow up. And we have found many ADUs that exist that are not permitted that way. I mean, what we try to do is get them in a point that we can permit them. Sometimes we can't, sometimes we can. And also what happens is people come in, maybe they bought this property and now they want to do something different. And we discovered that there's a unit that was built in the backyard somewhere on a weekend or something, you know. So that happens as well through the building permit processes sometimes. So enforcement will be handled by the city's code compliance officer. We will never have enough people on staff to be able to enforce all of our zoning laws. But we do the best we can and try to work through the city's code compliance officer, who actually now works under the direct supervision of the police department, but we still communicate with that person all the time. The staff currently have time funds to enforce this ordinance. Similar, we are not likely to hire another code compliance officer anytime real soon. It's something that you may want to look at in future budgets. So it will basically be business as usual in terms of.
How many pages of questions are there?
We don't have to read them if nobody else is interested in them.
I feel
okay.
like we're spending a lot of time on questions that may have
Okay.
already been answered to Ronnie, so I just,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I tried to answer everything.
yeah.
So if you have any questions about the Q&As, I'd be happy to.
Sounds like
address
Karen
them.
had a question.
I do. So in terms of the internal ADU, I guess I was a little confused so if with any internal ADU, you want the primary owner of that house to live there.
Yeah, that's what's proposed at this time.
I would disagree with that. If there is not an external ADU, I see no difference than, I mean, in a lot of communities, they're caretaker units, basically, and so to limit any opportunity to have somebody who is a part of our workforce renting any portion of a home, I would be opposed to. And then the time limit, I would really like to see us do a 6-month contract instead of 31 days. Just looking at Vail and Aspen and some of the other ski communities, that's what is in their code, is 6 month.
It has been proven that nightly rental companies will rent for 30 days and then let them out early.
Yeah,
And then rent for
there's a unit next to mine that can't be nightly rented. And
Okay.
sometimes the month is really, they're only staying there a week.
So then, a few things. So to the council, does anyone disagree with Karen strongly enough? Or could the motion include Karen's suggestion? Does anyone disagree with Karen?
Let me just
regarding
clarify.
that the owner must live there for the internal.
I guess my only question to the group is, are we aware of any industries, and I guess I think of a lot of outfitters or guides where the season is shorter than that, where presumably someone would rent for shorter for their seasonal job? I mean, otherwise I'm fine
Oh,
with
I'm,
it.
first,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Were you
going
asking about the
back
6
to
months?
The first one, sorry,
Oh.
was the requirement that the owner must live in the home. If they are renting an internal ADU, this says that there has to be an owner. So the question Karen's posing is, or what Karen is saying is that maybe that's not a requirement. I agree with her, but I want to hear if the council, if anyone else disagrees with that.
Well, I got a question for you. It seems to me if the owner is not required to be there and the ADU residents are, there's not a lot of difference, maybe if I get this wrong, between that arrangement and a second home. I mean, somebody could be, I'm afraid of abuse is what I'm afraid of, okay? And where there's a will, there's a way, you know, people will, if they can find, I mean, to circumvent the bona fide workforce application.
Well, maybe a second home, but then there's like an internal ADU, like a garage, like a basement apartment. So with this code, someone's second home, they couldn't rent out a portion of the home to a renter that lives here that might take care of their property, but then take care of other properties too. We're inhibiting that. I would argue, I agree with Karen unnecessarily. But it just depends on.
I guess in
what
my
you
mind,
think.
it becomes a duplex.
It's and it's two rentals of
So
a
it
duplex.
Functionally, that's fine.
As long as the owner is renting those, you know, long-term and not short-term, I don't know that it matters.
Okay, does it matter to anyone?
Well, my concerns are twofold. I mean, we know we don't have enough enforcement to track, and whether someone's there or not is probably moot. But, so I do feel like, yes, residents can have a conflict whether they're in the same building or a building 5 feet away. So in that sense, I agree with Karen. My concern is we could indirectly be creating a greater burden on an already taxed police department. And so I do feel like it would be a good idea to discuss that ADU owners and probably bunkhouse and other owners should be on record with the city with a contact person if there's a problem, so neighbors know who they can contact, because otherwise what happens is it all gets shoved to the police department, and it puts a burden on the neighbor because, first of all, you have to call the cops. You don't know if they're going to have a higher priority, so you don't know if they're going to show up. So you may not be able to sleep, blah, blah, blah. And I really do feel like it's great if we encourage more housing, but we can't deny that there's enforcement we can't meet and that we're shifting enforcement to an already taxed agency. And I do feel like there has to be some responsibility that there's a human being you could contact.
Have we looked at potentially using the housing authority to have these contracts on file and potentially?
So.
Well, one thing we would look, it wouldn't be the housing authority. The thing that we would look at is if you're renting, it would be considered a business. And so perhaps you pay $10 and it's a license to rent a home. And then we would have them as on file at City Hall, but.
We have them as a utility account owner, as the property owners are required to be on the utility account.
So that wouldn't help at like 10 PM of who to call. But
You call your landlord if it's like a problem between,
you would call the landlord.
yeah. Or, yeah.
Yeah,
Next
doesn't
time.
help the neighbor though.
Yeah, it does not help the neighbor, no.
Well, that's kind of a bigger thing, but the owner must live on site. Like, there's several things we need to work through here, so it feels like there's some heartburn here, but other heartburn, yes or no?
I agree with Karen on this. I have a follow-up question that's related to the IADU duplex distinction, but I think it's not central to this issue, so I'll leave it at that until we're settled here.
Okay, so no heartburn, No heartburn, I think. Some heartburn, but it's more around enforcement than, and that's in general, than it is whether or not the owner lives on site. So I think we've got an amendment that we're going to add to this motion if that's what we would do tonight. And then your other thing was 6 months instead of 31 days.
Yes.
Does anyone have heartburn with that?
So I'll just re-raise my question about, I don't know, certain employers or seasons that might exist. Do we think there are shorter ones where people are needing something transitional shorter than 6? Otherwise, I'm fine with it. But
I mean, 3 months.
Yeah, river guides aren't here for 6 months.
Yeah, they're here for
4. 3 or 4.
And, you know, we also want this to be used,
3 to
these to
4.
be used as potential foots in the door, feet in the door. So that,
Foots.
like,
I
we
like foots.
if we hire a planner one, and then they can rent an ADU until they decide they want to find something else and they start making more money or whatever, then they can do that. But it's, you know, it would provide an opportunity for somebody to establish themselves in town.
Yeah.
just like 4 months sound okay, Karen, or does that still seem fraught? I mean,
No, I mean,
yeah.
I think it's, but I would really like to go beyond a month because there.
Yeah.
3 would be like
Yeah.
substantially more.
I mean, again, I don't know how we're going to enforce it,
if-
but it has
if
been
we
one of my,
do
the
that-
31 was a concern of mine, so yeah, I'm much more comfortable with.
If we do that, are we telling any owner of any rental that he or she cannot rent on a month-to-month basis, even if they rent long-term?
Well, you would do 3 months and then you would go month to month. Yeah, how does that?
Because I mean, I think there are legitimate homeowners out there, you know, that are landlords that rent their properties month to month, and they're completely legitimate. I don't know that it's the city's place to say you have to have a lease.
That's a good point.
I'm just,
Month to month.
just with what I have read, that those are the things that some communities wish that they had done before, is that leases are longer so that you avoid the short-term rental snafu that's happening across the west. And then, and then what was the other thing? Yeah, just the attachment to workforce. I mean, mandating that, so.
So I agree with Karen's intent. I would like to know what the shortest period is that removes the appeal for STRs, to Tani's point, because like as a landlord, I commonly have leases, but they default to month, and in periods of economic instability like a pandemic, it's actually nice to transition to a month because renters get less stable, and if there's a eviction moratorium and you're locked into these long-term arrangements, it's kind of a pain. So just drawing from recent experience. But so I'd be willing to consider it, but I'd really like to know what the shortest period is that accomplishes the goal, which I don't think we're going to get to tonight via spitballing at the dais.
Well, and unless you have an example.
Again, I was looking at Vale and Aspen's examples, and they're 6 months, and they're doing their requirements, everything is sort of running through their housing authorities. So,
Yeah, but that's more like their deed restrictions and stuff, and so.
But this is a deed restriction for workforce housing. I mean, that's basically what we're creating here.
Yeah, it is.
Karen, do you know, like, in Vail and in those places, do they just start with 6 months and then they, those
I didn't get
individuals?
that- I didn't get
Yeah,
that.
okay, so we could contact them and
Yes.
ask if they're then
Yep.
shifting after that point to month, potentially, or if it's just
Right.
6 plus 6 plus 6.
I didn't read this as a deed restriction. I read this as a code revision where then you have the use by right and nobody is recording a deed against the property when you go to build an ADU.
Right now, we do.
Only
Require
for
a deed
the,
restriction that
whether or
says
not
no night
utilities.
rentals. And that would continue. And we could add that the occupancy has to be workforce housing or active employer housing.
This is, wait, we're confusing with the prior agenda item. Are we saying that so if you build an ADU, then you have a deed restriction?
Yes.
It's not just a use by right in your code,
It's a use by right, it's a permitted use. So you don't have to go to the planning commission or the city council, but there is a requirement to record a deed restriction on the title.
To say that it is,
Not a nightly rental right now.
well, then we don't have to worry about the 30-day. If that's what we're
I'm just,
saying in code.
it does happen. There's those workarounds. So if we can avoid, and whatever that number is, and I can make some calls tomorrow, but I would really like to encourage that because it is happening.
Yeah, I would like us to get more information, because when we went through our list of things we could do to remove barriers, I mean, one of the things on that initial list of, I don't know, 20 or 30 things was short-term rental enforcement and difficulty in doing so. So we know it's a problem.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
right now, this is the deed restriction or something like this they're supposed to record. A permit for accessory dwelling was issued to blank, which would be the current owner of this property, and there's an address. The owner shall strictly adhere to the prohibition of the use of accessory dwelling units as nightly or short-term rentals. Nightly rentals, and the definition of nightly rentals is accessory dwellings are intended for long-term rental of 30 days or more to the same individual and may not be used for nightly rentals.
Well, then I don't think the 30 days, I mean, it's an enforcement thing, but we wouldn't have to specify unless we want to. But that does, if we go the 6 months, it'll make the month-to-month complicated. So we need more information on that one. Okay. I wanted to throw out a couple of things. One is the size of 375. So I looked up what like a standard garage, one-car garage size is, footprint. Standard footprint for a one-car garage is a 12 by 20. So if somebody wanted to do a mother-in-law just above a standard size garage, 12 times 20 is 240. So that would be like the smallest. And in conversations with building department officials over and over again, they've always said you can definitely do a smaller footprint and have a toilet and a sink and a kitchen and a sleeping area for, smaller than 375 for sure.
And
So I
definitely
just wanted to ask council if you had an appetite to allow for smaller than 375,
At 350.
It's actually 350.
or sorry, 350.
I'm fine with that.
The 350 or a
No,
smaller?
going smaller. Or
So-
actually almost not even putting, I hate to say not even having them.
I mean,
minimum.
the code is going to
the
require
international code requirements, which we've
Yeah.
had that discussion
over and over
over
again.
and over.
With an ADU, let's see how small they can go and then see what it rents for. I don't have heartburn about size
So
personally.
20 by 20 is 400 square feet.
Yep, and a 12 by 20 is 240, which is the size of a garage, so.
I don't want to live there.
No, but, somebody that wants to not live in a van might park underneath and then live above it.
I'm fine with it.
You're fine
That's
with,
okay.
so no size or 240?
I think no size as long as it meets code. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah.
it'll be less of an imposition on the neighbors.
Y'all good with that?
Yeah, I mean, there will be probably some building code requirements for a certain amount of airspace or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be a zoning regulation.
Okay, so that is something it sounds like the council is in concert on. And then the other thing I was going to say is the restricting to only 2 ADUs. Let's say you have a big house and you have you're still blessed with acreage in the city, and you could fit 3 or 4 ADUs. Well, I, I mean, it might almost look like a little tiny home development, but do we care?
Yeah, I think we care.
Okay.
Because it's like Nora says, it changes neighborhood character. If you've got 4 tiny homes or 4, whatever, ADUs on the lot, and the original home that was built there, it changes your neighborhood character.
It certainly densifies it.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I agree with Connie and
we're
Nora.
we're not talking, you know, it's like Nora said, most of our lots in the city are not, they're not huge.
Yeah, and they're
It
developed.
goes back to the just because you can, should you.
Yeah. Well, and a great example is 4th East and Center. Big lot, 1 home, room to build. And if we didn't cap the number of ADUs, then that could potentially be a tiny home development, which I know Joe Kingsley was working on for a long time.
So tiny homes development is one of the things we need to work on in our residential zones for sure, to allow that kind of thing.
Or it
But
could just
again,
be,
that's another tool. you
yeah,
know?
or it could be part of this tool,
It could be.
which is what I'm saying, which I want to ask the council, like, how do you feel about that?
Personally, I think this is like Nora said, this is a way to modestly increase our housing without changing the surrounding neighborhood. And I would like to see if we, I don't, if we get any bites with this. And then with a piece of land like that, I would hope it would come forward to the planning commission and the council, because I think there are definitely spots in our community that make sense to not just have a single house on a very large parcel.
Yeah.
I think it branches into subdivision territory, I mean, what it amounts to. So I agree with Tony, I don't really want to go there right now.
Okay. So that sounds like keeping it at 2.
Yeah, there's an example on 3rd East of more of a court arrangement. So
That's R2, or sorry, that's R3,
yeah,
and so it's multi, but then
right.
they went and
But I
subdivided
feel,
them.
yeah, but I feel like the larger lots in town that have room for that sort of thing tend to be R3.
Yeah, true.
I mean, we've got this funny thing where our denser zoning actually has larger lots. By
I
and
might
large.
throw out too, down at the base of Rose Tree, where I live, there's
Oh, yeah.
Blackburn's place that, a little over 2 acres, and she's been struggling for years to try to decide what to do with that. The perfect place for something denser out there, so maybe this is an avenue for her to pursue.
That was the example I was saying, so if there was no limit to ADUs, then that one house could have a whole row of ADUs.
Possibly, yeah.
Although, if they're internal ADUs, what you're basically describing is an apartment, which is is sort of pushing the character of R2, I think.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know, you could do
That's a problem.
internal, because, that's an interesting.
I don't know, I think, if you ask me, the multiple ADU things kind of crosses the line into a lot of different, it could serve as a way to circumvent onerous rules elsewhere, I guess. Is what
Okay.
I'm trying- Which may be a good thing, maybe.
So I'm hearing a no with the only 2, but a no size. Okay, what else? What other, shifts to this language?
I have a few questions. So Nora, you're saying the amnesty thing is separate, right? So we don't
Yeah,
need to be discussing that now.
No.
And then I know you did note where pre-existing structures meet development standards of this chapter, the original structure may be designated as the accessory dwelling. So, and thanks for the example. So, that, okay, there, we have a small house that's 100 square feet, and folks are in the process of building, a new primary residence. So they might have the option that's going to be bigger than that. So they might have the option of the initial structure now turning into an ADU. But does that effectively mean, so any one of us could, if our house is small, we could build something larger and turn our house, what's our house now, into an ADU?
You could, if
Okay.
your lot's big enough, which yours probably isn't. But,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could.
And then in terms of height, I know there was some discussion about I think you said you were going to work on a diagram having to do with, the 30 feet and the 20 feet. So I'll let you touch on that one. But another question I have is what, if anything, was the thinking about, currently in the city, if you have a structure and you build an ADU, the technical building height, which in our case, the definition has to do with, slope of the roof, cannot exceed the primary structure. So somebody might have like an older home that's 1 story and they want to build an ADU to provide housing, but they might not be able to build a 2nd story for like a loft that somebody can stand in. But their intention might be to provide, a little more space for housing. So was that discussed at all in all of this? Was the intention to allow someone to potentially build something that high, or it's all again based on how tall the primary structure is?
I don't think you put anything in there about it being taller than restricting the height to the height of the building. Basically, what the exception is would be, right now, the code says specifically, if you have a garage and you want to build on top of the garage, the maximum height is 20 feet, which doesn't work that well. So we're saying if it's within the code required setbacks, they can go 30 feet, whether the house is 20 or 30. They could go 30 feet. And we also are saying that you could encroach into the setbacks a little bit at the 20-foot level, just to minimize just for stepping purposes and to minimize the impact on adjacent properties.
Okay. And then I'm hoping when we add more information to this and people come apply and ask about it, that we do spend a little time talking to the county, because I notice, we're not, if somebody, builds something that's deed restricted and they're supposed to rent it out, but we aren't going to charge them if they don't rent it out. So people should just know that under county standards, if you have an ADU and you're not renting it out, it will be taxed as a second home. And so it just is an added expense people should know about before they build one. I mean, I assume anybody's intention is going to be to build it and rent it out, but people should know that because it could come as a surprise.
You're saying it's a tax issue?
Yeah, but it's an added expense that somebody might not know about when they're building an ADU.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I quite frankly don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
same with the impact fees, yeah. So, and that's why I wonder about some of the amnesty properties, because some of these people might have one on their property that's old enough that they may now be subject to an impact fee, yeah.
And then
So-
Nora, I'm sorry, go ahead, Caitlin.
So Mayor, this is important work. I admit that I haven't quite wrapped my head around all the issues. It sounds like there may be an outstanding question or two, so my inclination is to postpone for 2 weeks.
No. I feel like maybe we could pass this. I'm going to make a plea to you all for considering passing this.
I agree with Kaylin.
I agree with Caitlin, too. We're talking about so many changes, I'm not going to, vote on it till I see something in writing with all of those expressed, yeah.
But as much as you can
All right,
raise the
then it's
issues-
going on our next agenda, and we're going to figure out the 60 or the 30 days versus the 6 months. We're going to incorporate the changes that we talked about tonight. What else would we consider changing that we want to see in a written document so that before you potentially table, let's get clear direction so that we can pass it at our next meeting.
I have one question, Nora. It's on the 3rd page of the summary. It's under the definitions of active employment household. It's number 5. It says a retiree with a work history required under subsections 1 through 3 of this section for the 5 years prior to retirement. does that mean that if your parent or your sister or your friend worked elsewhere for 20 years and you needed to bring them to your home, that they could not live in your ADU?
I think we added something about family being able to rent them. But other than that,
I'm not, I can see so many situations where a retiree or someone that didn't work in Grand County, either for medical reasons or, age-related, you just want them closer and you have an ADU. I don't like that work history for, I understand that we're trying to create workforce housing or actively employed households, but I think there are reasons, and there are legitimate reasons why you would want to bring up an aging parent or some other family member to your home.
Yeah, and I thought I did see something that family was excluded
Yes.
from that.
Well, it's in the, if you look at the definition of, like, for example, external accessory dwelling units, bullet 3, the purpose of ADUs is to create units that are for active employment households or family members. But it does get a little confusing when you get to that definition for active employment households, because I don't think we mentioned family again, so. Yeah, I think it can make you think that at least 50% have to meet those criteria 1 through 5. So if you just had one family member, it doesn't seem like they would meet it unless we specify that.
but I also thought about, Tani, the folks who are retired, maybe they didn't have their career here, but they want to retire here and they're on a limited income. We could certainly add that in somehow. The difficulty I was having is trying to figure out what the criteria would be.
Yeah.
Not impossible to do, but it would, we'd have to think on it.
And the county had that issue as well, and that's why they had that stipulation that if you were a retiree, that you had to work here. But having an exception for family, I think, is super important, especially since many parents are aging and needing to move out.
All parents are aging.
Yes, that's good. So I'm aging. I'm going to have to move into an ADU.
It's called a mother-in-law apartment.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so we just want to make super sure that family is excluded from the active employee requirement.
And then, can I ask just one quick question?
Totally.
So
Ask it now so that we can pass it next
So in
meeting.
some counties like California, getting away from the setbacks, you can attach an ADU to your existing house by just having a storage space with a roof over it. I don't know what our guidelines are here. Is that, like, what do you have to do to make it attached? If you were,
Why does it matter? Because if the requirements are the same, why does that matter?
just, so if, by attaching it, then you don't have the same setbacks, like if you, I don't know, there was just a point that I was reading that was sort of a wraparound to get away from an external ADU and just have it closer to the house so that you are in those parameters, but I was curious as to what constitutes attachment.
So, right now, the way the code reads is, if there's a maximum square footage of 1,000 square feet on an ADU, and we have had some folks that wanted one that was a little bit bigger. So what they did in essence is they connected the two structures and called it a duplex.
Okay.
So that's a pretty common solution because of our size restriction. However, it doesn't, and whether they're connected by a breezeway or not connected at all, there are some minimum fire standards that have to be met. And that depends on the type of construction you're using and where your openings are and all those kinds of things, which is why I wrote that section in here that said they have to be at least 10 feet apart unless the building official determines that the fire protection is handled some other way.
Just,
But yeah, right now, people are just doing it because they have to get a little bit more square footage
Right.
on their ADU. And I think it's, in many cases, it's silly, but.
just to double check, Nora, are we saying that they can now be 1,500 square feet? I thought I read that somewhere. Did you just?
1,500 square feet if the lot is larger than 20,000 square feet.
And that's about a half an acre, is that correct?
Sorry?
At 20,000 square feet?
It's a
is
little
about
less than half an acre.
Okay.
And so you could have a duplex and 2 ADUs in the R2. That's 4 units,
On the R2, let me think, 2 ADUs, if you have a big lot, yes,
if you have a big lot
If you have enough parking, yeah.
and
and
parking.
you have enough parking.
So, because an ADU requires,
One.
One additional space.
so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parking spots.
Yeah,
Plus, yeah,
Is there, because there's 2 for each side of the duplex?
a duplex requires 4, right? Each unit
Oh,
has 2.
okay, okay.
And then the ADU and the ADU. So there'd be 6 parking spots. And that would be an R2 lot.
Yeah.
So that would be the maximum build out. So that's less creep than like unlimited ADUs. But that would be a maximum build out
if
for an
only on a
R2
big
lot.
lot, yeah.
So is each side of a duplex considered a primary dwelling?
Either side could be,
Can both
But-
sides be?
yeah. Well, then it would be a twin home if you had 2 separate owners.
But a primary dwelling can be occupied by a renter, or is a primary dwelling only an owner?
The definition of primary dwelling is that it's their primary residence, and that's listed that way on the tax bill.
Whether it's rented or owned.
So, and each side of a duplex could have an internal ADU?
I suppose, yeah.
But then they could
But then
only
you
have
couldn't do the
one
external one.
external. Wait, how is it read, does it read as external? Could you have an internal and 2 external?
That wasn't the intent. The intent was that,
Because now you're thinking.
yeah, and again, I want to,
But if the intent is not to allow it, then let's just
Right.
make sure that the number 2 means the sum of either internal or external, right?
Right, I just want to be clear on what we're allowing, and,
Yeah.
yeah,
2 total ADUs
because it seems like,
if you're
I
lot,
think that was the intent, so we should just clarify that.
yeah.
Even though I don't agree with that. We should probably clarify.
Seems to me we're creating a whole alternative universe here, you know, that's what I think. But it could be interesting, it might work, I don't know.
There is no spoon. The Matrix. All right, well, any other things that we would want to add to this? Otherwise, if we think of things like as you're falling asleep tonight, let's be really proactive. Let's send it to Nora. Let's talk amongst ourselves if there's brilliance between now and 2 weeks. And let's try to get this passed in 2 weeks. Thank you, Nora, for your work on it.
Sure.
Expect brilliance from someone, potentially. And with that, I would entertain any motion.
I'll move to table for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tawny. All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much, Nora. Okay. Next up, 9.3, dispersed parking cooperative agreement with UDOT. Really, it's the next step of that cooperative agreement where we are approving the dispersed parking project task order tonight. Welcome, Chuck. I don't know if we need a presentation. Council, would you like for Chuck to get into the details, or would you like to make a motion?
I move to approve the dispersed parking project task order with Civil Science Incorporated in the amount of $495,900 and authorize the mayor to sign it.
Thank you. Tony, is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion. Yes, Ronnie.
I just want to thanks Chuck for answering my question. So I just want to make double sure. So we talked about how, I think it's the third page of the scope of work, how in the little font under assumptions, they note no planting or irrigation improvements or design are anticipated in the medians and therefore are not included in the scope of work except for the areas outlined by Emma Boulevard. But it looked like you were thinking they would be addressing all of the streets. So I just want to make sure, do we need to correct them on that assumption or?
No, I think what they're saying is, and we've had discussions
Yeah.
internally, and I've had discussions with civil science, it's going to be difficult to put irrigation into those median bays. They'll do irrigation plans for the park strips, and we'll figure out ways to get plants there, but in all likelihood, it's going to be limited plants in the median permanent, like trees and such, but we won't know until we start digging into it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I didn't know if we were paying them for landscape architecture and, contemplating the lighting and stuff. I just wanted to make sure if we were gonna be getting their brains to think through how the lighting would combine with potential vegetation. So I just wanted to, tell if they were opting out there. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is the A team that we've tried to put together for this project, both the the engineer, the landscape architect, and the lighting consultant have all worked for the city previously, and I believe in a positive manner. So I think there'll be a real holistic approach to this.
Thanks.
Any other questions or discussion items?
So Chuck, I just was curious. So I've been in contact with different solar light companies, and can I have them start talking to you? The advancements in solar lights, I'm just curious if we really haven't had that discussion as a council, and it can save us so much money, and it's actually, the initial output is a lot less than.
Yes, direct answer is yes.
Okay.
Have them call me, and civil science, there's even language in here. They understand the city and how important sustainability is to us. So I think that we're open to good ideas and good products.
Okay.
Anything else? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for sticking around.
I came back.
Yeah. 9-4, comment letter for the United States Forest Service Manti-LaSalle Forest Plan Revision. Is there a motion?
I'll make one. I move to approve the comment letter for the Forest Service Manti-LaSalle Forest Plan Revision.
Thank you. Ronnie, is there a second?
I would second.
Thank you, Karen. Is there something, do I hear something?
Yeah, I think it's either someone's phone or it's,
I think it's Chuck.
okay.
At least it's
Chuck,
not his
are
alarm.
you talking? Do you have
Is your phone talking?
Okay. Thanks to those who drafted the plan. Read the letter. And the plan.
And the plan.
And the plan, but more specifically, the letter. Any other comments? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And 9-5, proposed resolution 32-2021, a resolution of the governing body of the City of Moab declaring certain property owned by the City of Moab as surplus. Is there a motion?
I move to approve Resolution 32-2021, a resolution of the governing body declaring city property as surplus.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Any discussion on the items on the list?
I'm excited the painting may be finding a home.
I know.
Yeah, where is it
Say
going?
goodbye.
It's going to the museum.
Oh, great.
Yes, the Moab Museum. What's really exciting is if you've been to the museum, the new museum, there's a mini version of it that is an original as well on the museum wall.
A mini-me.
Yeah, and so when I went to the museum with Oscar, we were like, whoa, that was the painting that was in my office when I moved into it 4 years ago. And I've had conversations with Mark Beeson and also Dan Mick about how they really feel like that should be at the museum. So it's very exciting to move it over there and have that be part of their permanent collection and on display. They're very excited to display that at the museum. Very cool. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Approval of the bills against the city of Moab.
Do you have to say anything about this, Ben, before? Okay. Alrighty, I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $396,868.32.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
Aye.
Thank you. I'll take that as a second.
It's tough like a pirate day.
I like that it's a smaller amount than last month, but Ben, did you want to talk about a little thing we're doing here?
I will, yeah. So we have, it's actually a state requirement that we present the financials to the council on a monthly basis. It doesn't have to be approved. It's just more of a presentation, and our auditors ask for that annually. I will still, as the finance director, present quarterly financials and a budget summary, budget overview, but this will be presented just monthly for the prior month. Just as an update, and you're free to ask any questions. It's also a mechanism just of accountability, similar to how we do the bills, just to have another set of eyes on the financials on a monthly basis.
One thing we talked about is collapsing to just be less pages, collapsing what is included in the report to just be a summary of the by department. But then, so whoever approves the bills would then have the opportunity to answer questions about the items, any items. And this is coming out of comments that were made as we were going through budget, regarding transparency, regarding whether or not we were looking at our budget. So, Ben, I'm really grateful. Tani, thanks for reviewing bills. And yeah, it's good. Thank you. So, did you want to say anything about it? Or? No? Okay, awesome. All those in favor?
Can I ask Ben a
Oh.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Mayor. Ben, so July, August, and September are sales and use taxes compared to last year? Where are we?
Yeah, so I will, there is some seasonality differences compared to last year. I'm not prepared to answer that tonight, but in the next meeting, I'm planning to address that, the seasonality of sales tax revenues.
Okay.
Well, and the idea is that we can have a more robust conversation during those quarterly reports. So this is more.
So our next meetings are the quarterly report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will.
Is there another question? Okay. Now I will ask all those in favor.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We do not need to have an executive closed session this evening. So
Really?
is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, the Tani was first and Karen was second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Wow.